It is our quality time interview on Kansas Sports Chatter, an opportunity to spend a little extra time with our next guest, which is Steve Martin, the head coach of the Wichita Northwest High School football team. Coach, appreciate you jumping on. How are things in the City League?
Yeah, it's going good. Right now we thought it was going to be a very competitive league this year. I think we're seeing some teams that in the past have had some very good traditions start to come back, and it's a good league. It's good for the City League to have so many competitive teams up there, and right now we're just cruising along, just trying to make it to the next week, and for us, it's about what we do each week. But it's the City League. It's going to be one of those things that comes down to a couple games. It's pretty top heavy, but what's good is that it's getting a little bit more balanced.
Well, you grew up at Andale. How nice has it been to kind of coach in that area, especially now for so many years that you've been at Wichita Northwest?
Oh yeah, I started my career, pretty much as a defense coordinator for my high school football coach Matt McKee at Halstead, as my college career wind down. So, first head coaching job was at Troy, and my fourth year at Troy, we had a lot of success in my 4 years there. But I lost my mom over Thanksgiving weekend my last year, and and that took a toll on me, being away from family and kind of taking it out on myself, and not being around family as much as I wanted to. It was a thing that me and my wife Natalie talked about, is getting back to the area, and the chance I got was to go be defense coordinator at Wichita Heights under Rick Wheeler, and learned how to run a big school program. And 3 state championship appearances at Heights my 3 years there kind of propelled me to the spot I'm in here at Northwest. And slowly but surely, we feel like we've turned this thing into a program that can compete at the state level. So being around family is great. I'd have to say that I probably saw my immediate family more when I lived in Troy, because we always made it a point to go see family. And now, you're back home, you kind of get immersed in what your family's doing as my kids have gotten older and stuff. So, but it's great to be on the west side of Wichita. My grandma grew up right down the road from Northwest, in between Bishop Carroll and Northwest. So it's familiar territory for me. And I love what we've done on the west side, and love the community we've made at Northwest.
So when you realized that, okay, we really want to focus on family and get back closer to family, what was your first approach? Like, who did you start reaching out to, and what did you start looking for? Was it immediately going to be within the city of Wichita, or anything close?
Well, as anything closer than Troy, which is up in northeastern Kansas, up by Atchison. So, there were some openings that came up. Clay Center, Concordia, Hayesville campus came open. But, I understand that they weren't going to take a shot on a guy that was teaching 2A, 1A football, that had a, fairly successful record. But, at those times, those programs needed some home run hires. And, as I started to get farther into the spring, a great friend of mine, Harry Hester, who's down at Cherryville, was the head coach at McLoughlin. He was the Kansas Football Coaches Association kind of technology manager, I guess you could call it. He ran the website and did everything. And at the time, Rick Wheeler was the president of the association, and Harry knew that Rick had an opening, and Harry called Rick and said, "Hey, I got a guy that would be great for you, and would love to introduce you to him." And, so Rick started kind of doing his background check on me, and found out I was from Andale. So, reached out to Gary O'Hare, who was at Andale at the time, and turned that thing into a monster right now, my hometown. And reached out to guys like Ted Easter, and got some background checked on me. And I got a call from Rick one day, and he said, "Coach, I want you to interview for my defense coordinator job." And, at the time, being from small city, small town Kansas, Andale, Kansas, and then coaching in a small community like Halstead and Troy, it was a little bit intimidating to go into a school. At the time, I believe Heights was 1,700. So I didn't know if that would be a good fit for me. And, sitting there and praying about it, and talking to my wife about it, and kind of getting the background and looking what Rick had done at Heights, I thought it would be a good opportunity to go learn how to run a big school program. And, going to a big program like that from a small school, not being the head coach, probably was a very smart move for me. And, but at the end of the day, I think my strengths are I connect to kids. I'm a people guy. And I know how to relate to kids in whatever shape or form they come in. And, had a lot of success there. So for me, it was just trying to get back to the area, and luckily, right down the road from Andale on 53rd Street was Wichita Heights, and that was a blessing for me, my family, and my career.
Talking with Steve Martin, the head coach of Wichita Northwest football. Yeah, you mentioned building something really special, and it's also been fun to watch you as far as your scheduling is concerned. Because obviously you had the city league teams, but you guys have done a pretty good job of kind of pulling a few from the outsiders, I guess. I mean, you guys have traveled to Junction City. Manhattan's been on the schedule here recently. For you, how do you balance that schedule, knowing they have so many Wichita schools, but also trying to find some good competition outside the Wichita area?
Well, for me, I really felt like when we were in our state run, we were in the state title game in five, but when we got knocked down classification, we were down there 3 years in a row. The year before that, we were in the 6A semis and lost to Derby. I felt like at times maybe we were unprepared for adversity. You don't learn about your team when you're winning 77-0. And that wasn't a knock on anybody we were playing. It's just that we felt like we needed to challenge ourselves to grow as a program. And, the biggest glaring thing to me was seeing, what the EKL does. I mean, every week up in the EKL is a dogfight. And those guys seem to always make it far in November, despise their record. And so, in 2020, the COVID year where we got our schedule stripped down to bare bones, Bishop Carroll at the time, another good friend of mine, Dusty Trail, I mean, they scheduled anybody and anybody who was tough. And, at first, when you look at those kind of schedules, you sit back and you go, my God, are they going to make it till November? But,
Right.
If they do and they become battle tested and they develop their young guys, and if someone gets injured, a young guy gets thrown in there. And so, the amount of positives far outweigh the negatives when you schedule tough. And, luckily for us, I can't remember exactly if there was an error or a conflict in our schedule, but, at first we had Junction City and Manhattan on our schedule in this cycle. And then week 8, I can't remember if our city league, something happened in our city league schedule where we had an open date. And so we were fortunate enough to go get Goddard Eisenhower, and Coach Fisher's a good friend of mine out there at Eisenhower. And just so happens that they had a really good team last year to really challenge us going into the playoffs. So for us, learning off that is, we try to make sure our schedule is tough, because in Kansas football, it's the old days of the district play when, 6A. And when I was in school in 3A at Andale, only one team made it out of districts. And now, your schedule kind of goes out the window a little bit when it comes to playoffs time, other than home field advantage. And so for us, we feel like getting on the road, since we don't travel that much at Northwest. I mean, the farthest drive for us, if we play Southeast, would be Southeast across town for 30 minutes. So anytime you can get on a bus, just like we did at Junction City this week, 2 hours away, our kids don't get that opportunity to travel. And, it's foreign territory. Every game, no matter who you're playing, is tough, especially on the road, and going on the bus 2 hours away. Our kids aren't familiar with that. Their routine is off. They're not used to that. And so being able to do that, is great. So, we feel like our schedule has really challenged us to get us ready for November.
Coach, it's been fun to see the pure amount of individual talent that has come through those Wichita Northwest doors over the years, and no different this year. When you have an ultra talented player or players, like, how do you approach some of those individuals? Do you try to treat them just like everybody else? Or, I mean, but like when you have someone that's going to be at that next level sometime, like, what's it like coaching that individual?
Well, I think the best personality you could probably call Brees Hall, and he'd tell you that there was no special treatment for Brees when he is here. I'm a big believer that your best players have to be tested in your program on a daily basis. And when others see that the coaching staff is challenging, or myself is challenging, those quote unquote star guys, those next level guys, is that it's important to set the precedence that they're not better than anybody on that team. And so, with everything you're seeing with the portal and, NIL stuff, and, really, you're fighting a daily basis of selfishness. And that has really crept into the high school game, where people are looking out for themselves. And so when you can sit there and have discipline in your program, when you can demand, things from your stars, that says that sends a very bold message to your team that, everybody on this team is important. But, for our guys, they stand out for a reason. They put the time in the off season. And, we've been very blessed with a lot of kids that have came in with natural talent. I would not say we've done a whole lot of things other than pushing them and developing them and their skill level. But, at the end of the day, if you were sitting here talking to a college coach, what they would say is, they're looking for attributes. They're looking for the height. They're looking for the length. They're looking for these certain things in these quality young men. And so, when we have a kid like that, we start on the recruiting trail pretty early to get these guys on the radar. And luckily, through the years of when we had Marcus and Brees, where that really kind of brought our program on a national front when it came to recruiting, is, we kept those guys as contacts in our backlog. Dan Lenning was a defensive assistant at Georgia, then became the defensive coordinator at Georgia, but he was at Alabama when those guys were as a graduate assistant, I believe, and he was contacting us, and now he's the head coach at Oregon. So it's about keeping those relationships with those guys for our kids in the future. And so I think that's what we do best, is kind of branching out and really networking ourselves as coaches for the benefits of our players. And it's really played off, and you can see it in this class that we have right now, the class of 26.
Coach, it's been impressive to watch. Appreciate your time, and best of luck the rest of the season.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
That is Steve Martin, the head coach of the Wichita Northwest Grizzlies football team. That'll do it for our Quality Time interview.